Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our next question from this short story under discussion, A Rose for Emily. We will discuss this story as a Southern Gothic story today. This story, as you have now gone through the storyline and the text of the story as well, is a depiction of the Southern life in general in America, and in particular, the tradition of this Gothic story writing is also imprinted in this very story. We will discuss this question along with some of the themes presented through this Gothic story writing tradition. Dear students, this story, A Rose for Emily, is often described as a Southern Gothic story. Let's first discuss whether it is amongst this tradition of Gothic stories or not. Then we will decide what is the status of this story as a Gothic story. What is Southern Gothic stories? Southern Gothic is a literary tradition that came into its own in the early 20th century. Although this type of horror story writing goes back to Galsworthy and Mrs. Gaskell in the 18th century, yet this newfound tradition, it is a Europe-wide type of phenomena. It is rooted in the Gothic style, which had been popular in European literature for many centuries. Gothic writers concocted wild, frightening scenarios in which mysterious secrets, supernatural occurrences, horrible and horror incidents, and characters' extreme duress, that is, the pressure and stress and strain, conspired to create a breathless reading experience. Shocking, horrible experience. Gothic style of writing focused on the morbid and grotesque in life, and the genre often featured certain set pieces and characters, drafty castles laced with cobwebs, mysterious places, dark places, bloodshed, secret passages, and frightened, wide-eyed heroines and persona whose innocence does not go untouched. Rather, bloodshed, sex, everything was there in these Gothic stories, which were very popular in European literature of different countries in their local languages. Uh, Please remember. Dear students, as you have just known that this Gothic tradition, writing of horror stories, morbid stories, grotesque stories, came from the European literature, which was in shape of folk literature, you may call it, or the local literature in those cultures. Then this came to Britain and America especially. Some of the writers of the British Isles also got influenced by this tradition in the 20th century, but no prominent name is to be seen except these American writers who were very much influenced by this uh, stream of Gothic stories. Although they borrow the essential ingredients of the Gothic stories of the Europe, the writers of Southern Gothic fiction in America were not interested in integrating elements of the sensationalism, sensational solely for the sake of creating suspense or titillation, that is, excitement, suspense. Writers such as Flannery O'Connor, Tennessee Williams, Truman Capote, Harper Lee, Edora Welte, Rickson Caldwell, and Carson McCullers were drawn to the elements of Gothicism for what they revealed about human psychology and the dark underlying motives that were pushed to the fringes of society. Some of the mainstream writers of this uh, movement, that is the Gothic movement of fiction in the southern uh, area of American land. These writers, whom we know now as the mainstream Gothic writers of the South, the Southern America, uh, were not interested in the superficial depiction of the supernatural beings and the horrors for the sake of horrors, but were these Southern Gothic writers were interested in exploring the extreme antisocial behaviors that were often a reaction against a confining code of social conduct in society in the modern age. Southern Gothic often hinged on the belief that daily life and the refined surface of the social order prevalent in the modern age were fragile and illusory, disguising disturbing realities or twisted psyches of the people. The crushing pressure of society was the main target of these Gothic writers, and the shattered psyche of the individuals in this disturbing environment of the modern age. Faulkner, with his dense and multi layered prose, traditionally stands outside this group of practitioners. However, in this story, Emily's story, we find some ingredients and features of the Gothic tradition which surely influenced Faulkner as a writer as well. Dear students, however, A Rose for Emily, that is Emily's story, reveals the influence that Southern Gothic tradition had on William Faulkner's writing. This particular story has a moody and forbidding atmosphere, a crumbling old mansion, just like the old stories in which some castles with cobwebs were presented, and a mysterious place, you may say, a dark, gloomy, mysterious place, and decay, putrefaction, decay and corruption, and grotesquerie. This is another type of fiction that is found in the 20th century European literature, grotesquerie. This type of fiction was specially meant for horror stories, but it was also a part of the Gothic tradition. Dear students, after knowing that the Gothic tradition of Europe was mainly about the presentation of the horror, bloodshed, supernaturalism, and the unknown and the mysterious worlds in which man is bound to be violent, bound to be caught up in violence. Now we come on to our main target. This story as a Gothic story. Faulkner's work uses the sensational elements of the Gothic tradition to highlight an individual's struggle against an oppressive society, जो कि इस कहानी के बेटे हमें स्टोरी लाइन से भी पता चलता है कि यहाँ जिस तरह से एक फ़र्द की इंडिविजुअलिटी को किस तरह से मुआशरे के ऑपरेशन ने जो है उसका बाप जो है ना, देखें वो अथॉरिटेरियन बाप जो है वो रिप्रेजेंट करता है उस माशरे का रुकन है तो ये ऑपरेशन जो है इट इज़ ऑन द होल सोसाइटल ऑपरेशन दैट इज़ अंडर गोइंग रैपिड चेंज। इसमें बहरहाल तब्दीलियाँ आ रही हैं। अब वो बात नहीं रही, लोगों ने आवाज़ बुलंद करना शुरू की हुई है इस ऑपरेशन के ख़िलाफ़। यही फॉकनर की इस कहानी का जो है वो मोटिव है। Another aspect of the Southern Gothic style is appropriation and transformation from the morbid to the refined to the cultured. Faulkner has appropriated the image of the damsel in distress. That वो दुशीज़ा जो डिस्ट्रेस में है उसके इमेज को जो है वो उसने अप्रोप्रिएट करने की कोशिश की है एंड ट्रांसफॉर्म्ड इट इनटू एमिली, ए साइकोलॉजिकली डैमेज्ड स्पिंस्टर। एक ऐसी दुशीज़ा बैचलर जो साइकोलॉजिकली बेचारी इनसेन हो चुकी है, साइको केस बन गई है। एंड इट इज़ ऑल बिकॉज ऑफ द सप्रेशन शी हैज़ टू फेस फ्रॉम द आउटसाइड वर्ल्ड, फ्रॉम हर फादर, फ्रॉम हर फैमिली, फ्रॉम द कम्युनिटी and from every side of her life. Her mental instability and necrophilia have made her an emblematic Southern Gothic heroine. This is an important point here that makes this story a Gothic story. बेटे उसकी ये जो मेंटल इंस्टेबिलिटी जिसको शायर ये मुसन्निफ जो हैं हमारे फॉकनर साहब जो हैं वो बहुत ज़ोर देते हैं इस पर, वो मेन फोकस है इस कहानी का। और वो ख़ास तौर पर जो उसका नेक्रोफीलिया को बुनियाद बनाया गया है, कहानी की बुनियाद जो है वो थीम पीछे जो है वो नेक्रोफीलिया है। ये नेक्रोमेंसी से, नेक्रोमेंसी आप समझते हैं, और नेक्रोफीलिया जो है इट इज़ ए स्पेशल काइंड ऑफ बीमारी कह लें अब इसको, या जहनी पर गंदगी कह लें, जो जहनी आलूदगी कह लें, जो इसका इन कहानियों की इस कहानी को जो है वो स्पेशली एक साउथर्न गोथिक कहानी जो है वो बनाती है। Dear students, in A Rose for Emily, Faulkner doesn't rely on a conventional linear approach to present his characters' inner lives and motivations, unlike the writers of the stream of consciousness technique. Rather, he fractures, breaks, and bifurcates time, shifts, and manipulates time, stretching the story out over several decades, spanning from the very early age of Emily to almost 80 years, 74 years. Yeah. Almost half of a century's span has been covered in this very story. We learn about Emily's life through a series of flashbacks, and these flashbacks play a very important role. Reminiscences, and these are the reminiscences, the flashbacks of the narrator. The story begins with a description of Emily's funeral and then moves ahead into the near distant past. And the story plunges it deep into the past. At the end of the story, we see that the funeral is a flashback as well, preceding the unsealing of the upstairs bedroom door, or rather, unveiling the mystery hidden behind that door. In the story, we see Emily as a young girl attracting suitors whom her father chases off with a whip, and as an old lady when she dies at 74. And this is a very wide gap of time, bifurcation of time by the writer. As Emily's grip on reality grows more tenuous, weak, fragile over the years, tenuous, the South itself experiences a great deal of change in itself. ये सोसाइटी की बात हो रही है कि जैसे जैसे एमिली ही अपनी जो है वो रियलिटी पर ग्रिप वीक नहीं होती उसकी वक्त गुजरने के साथ साथ, बल्कि ये जो साउथर्न माशरा है उसमें भी जो है वो तब्दीली आती है। बाय मूविंग फॉरवर्ड एंड बैकवर्ड इन टाइम, Faulkner portrays the past and the present as coexisting and is able to examine how they influence each other. He creates a complex, layered, and multi-dimensional world to present the life of his main character, Emily. Dear students, very vividly, Faulkner presents two visions of time in the story. One is based on the mathematical precisional time and objectivity of reality, that is the objective time, in which time moves forward relentlessly, and what is done. No backwards, nothing comes back. Only the present exists. It is the reality. The other vision is more subjective. Time moves forward, but events do not stay in distant memory. Time moves forward, but events don't stay in distant memory. Rather, memory can exist unhindered, alive, and active, no matter how much time passes or how much things change. Even if a person is physically bound to the present, the past can play a vibrant, dynamic role. And this is the theme presented in the story, the theme of time. Emily stays firmly planted in a subjective realm of time, where life moves on with her in it, but she stays committed, regardless of anything, to the past. Dear students, it is also very interesting to note and very important to note that the unnamed narrator of this story serves as the town's collective voice, as depicted. We, the narrator uses we, except at the end of the story where he uses they. Critics have debated whether it is a man or woman. There are many interpretations of this narrator. Some people think that the narrator is a man. Some people think that uh, the narrator is a woman. A former lover of Emily Grierson's, the boy who remembers the sight of Mr. Grierson in the doorway once a boy saw him holding the whip in his hand to whip off the young boys from his door, the suitors, or the town gossip. Maybe it is the collective voice of the town in shape of gossip, spearheading the effort to break down the door at the end of the story. It is possible too that the narrator is Emily's former servant, Toby. Maybe he is also very close to Emily. He might be the narrator. He would have known her intimately, perhaps including her secrets, secrets of the dead bodies she is hiding in the house. A few aspects of the story support this last theory of the narrator being the servant today, such as the fact that the narrator often refers to Emily as Miss Emily, as he does in the real story, and provides only one descriptive detail about the Colonel Torres, the mayor, the former mayor, who has also died. The fact that he enforced a law requiring that black women wear aprons in public, that mayor enforced that law. In any case, the narrator hides behind the collective pronoun we. This is important. He speaks as a collective voice. By using we, the narrator can attribute what might be his or her own thoughts and opinions to all of the townspeople, the community at large, turning private ideas into commonly held beliefs, customs, and rituals. Indeed, the presence of the narrator also points to the fact that the storyteller, Mr. Faulkner, has depicted him just like the other Gothic stories. We find narrators in those Gothic tradition stories. The narrator deepens the mystery of who he is and how much he knows at the end of the story. When the townspeople discover Homer's body, especially, the narrator confesses, already we knew that an upstairs bedroom had been sealed up, closed down by the lady. However, we never find out how the narrator knows about the room, whether he was a secret partner of that murder. More important, at this point, for the first time in the story, the narrator uses the pronoun they instead of we to refer to the townspeople. Rather, you may say that the narrator frees himself of this collectivism and now frees himself from this we structure and gets out of this we and goes to refer to the other people as they, just making himself aloof, separating himself from the common other people. First, he says, already we knew that there was one room. Then he changes to they waited until Miss Emily was decently in the ground before they opened it. This is a significant shift from the point of view of the narration of this story. Until now, the narrator has willingly grouped himself with the rest of the townspeople, accepting the community's actions, thoughts, and speculations as his own. Here, however, at the end of the story, the narrator distances himself from the action, the main action, as though the breaking down of the door is something he can't bring himself to endorse. Whether he is guilty of the crime committed by the lady, the shift of this kind is quick and subtle, and he returns to we in the passages that follow after that. But it gives us an important clue about the narrator's identity. Whoever he was, the narrator cared for Emily, was very intimate to her, despite her eccentricities and horrible, desperate act. In a town that treated her as an oddity, an incongruous lady, and finally a horror, a morbid kind of uh, story, lady, a kind, sympathetic gesture, rather, even one as slight as symbolically looking away when the private door is forced open, stands out, remains aloof, remains diffident, is not ready to open the secret of the lady he shared with. Dear students, we find many elements of a Gothic story in this very presentation of William Faulkner in shape of a short, brief, crispy type of short story. But now we will discuss two main themes, rather the very apparent themes discussed in detail, pointed out in detail in the story. The first one is the theme of tradition, orthodoxy versus newness, modernism, and that is called change. Old people, as you know, are very adamant to uh, adhering to the old values. They do not let their past run away from them in physical and in uh, whatever the shape that is. Then change is a must for this newly industrialized area that is going to be changed. Old city has to be turned anew by new authorities. Buildings are changing, streets are changing, a new world is emerging out of the old one. But Emily and her family is not ready to accept this change, change from the past to present. She is not ready to run along the time She is still in the past, although she is living in the present. Through the mysterious figure of Emily Grierson, Faulkner conveys the struggle that comes from trying to maintain tradition in the face of widespread radical change that is a must to come. Jefferson, the town presented in the story, is at a crossroads uh, now, embracing a modern, more commercial future while still perched on the edge of the past. From the faded glory of the Grierson home to the town cemetery where anonymous Civil War soldiers have been laid to rest, Emily herself is a tradition, steadfastly staying the same over the years despite many changes in her community. She is in many ways a mixed blessing. As a living monument to the past, she represents the traditions that people wish to respect and honor. However, she is also a burden and entirely cut off from the outside world, nursing eccentricities that others can't understand. This conflict between the tradition and the upcoming change that the world has to face is the main theme, main current of the story, and has very beautifully been intertwined into the texture of the story. The tussle between past and present, between past and future. This time struggle, this tussle between the changing times, has been the main focus of Faulkner in many of his stories and novels, especially. Just look at some of his novels, like The Sound and the Fury, Sanctuary, and others. Looking upon Emily, when we look at her character in this story, Emily seems to be living in a timeless vacuum and a world of her own making, refusing to have metallic numbers affixed to the side of her house when the town receives modern mail service. She just abhors anything modern. She is out of touch with the reality that constantly threatens to break through her carefully sealed parameters of life. Garages and cotton gins have replaced the grand antebellum homes. The aldermen try to break with the unofficial agreement about taxes once forged between Colonel Stortois and Emily, but she remains adherent to this agreement between that former mayor and the family. This new and younger generation of leaders brings in Homer's company to pave the sidewalks, a sign of modernity, newness that has to usurp everywhere, that has to come, appear everywhere, and take over the old things. But she stands as a monumental figure amongst this changing things, change of times. Although Jefferson, as a town, uh, still highly regards traditional notions of honor and respect, reputation, the narrator is critical of the old men in their Confederate uniforms who gather for Emily's funeral. For them, as for her, time is relative. The past is not a faint glimmer, but an ever present, idealized realm in which she is living. Emily's macabre, ghastly type of bridal chamber that is exposed in the end is an extreme attempt to stop time and prevent change, a symbol of unchangeability. Although doing so comes at the expense of human life. She takes the life of Homer and the lover, the fans, and thus tries to just make time timeless for her. She thinks that if she kills the man, he will not be able to run away from her, will be there for her forever and ever. In the story, dear students, we find the looming shadows of death, the power of death everywhere. Death hangs over a rose for Emily from the narrator's mention of Emily's death at the very beginning of the story, through the description of Emily's death haunted life to the foundering of tradition in the face of modern changes. In every case, death prevails over every attempt to master it. Emily, a fixture in the community, gives in at last to death slowly, gradually, although she has secluded herself, running away from society, but death never spares anybody. The narrator compares her to a drowned woman, a blotted and pale figure, left too long in the water, pond of water. And this is death incarnate. This is death as an equalizer. Death, the most powerful, the most powerful agent of nature. No one can run away from this power of death. Again, dear students, in the same description, the narrator refers to her small, spare skeleton. She is practically dead on her feet. Emily stands as an emblem of the old South, the old traditions, the olden times, a grand lady whose respectability and charm rapidly decline through the years, much like the outdated sensibilities the Griersons represent in the story. The death of the old social order will prevail, despite many townspeople's attempts to stay true to the old ways. The old has to give way to the new. The old time has to give way, has to die in the hands of the new times, the change that is. And that is law of nature. As we see as readers, Emily attempts to exert power over death by denying the fact of death itself, the reality of death itself, her bizarre relationship to the dead bodies of the men she has loved, her necrophilia rather, is revealed first when her father dies. Unable to admit that he has died, Emily clings to the controlling paternal figure, whose denial and control became the only yet extreme form of love she knew. She gives up his body only reluctantly after 3 4 days, keeping him in the same place on that chair in which he died. When Homer dies, Emily refuses to acknowledge it at once. Again, although this time she herself was responsible for bringing about the death of her lover. In killing Homer, she was able to keep him near her, supposing that he will be there forever with her. However, Homer's lifelessness rendered him permanently distant. He is no more alive. He is dead. Death has prevailed again. Emily and Homer's grotesque marriage reveals Emily's disturbing attempt to fuse life and death, where death ultimately triumphs. She thinks that she is married to the dead man and lives with him in that wedding chamber. वो उजला और उसी में उसके साथ रात को सोती भी है, जिस बालों का मौजूद होना ये आखिर पर सबूत भी है. तो बेटे ये जो हमारी कहानी है ये वो जो गोथिक ट्रेडिशन है उसके बहुत से एलिमेंट्स अपने अंदर समोए हुए हैं और इसके मुख्तलिफ आस्पेक्ट्स को देखते हुए हम ये कह सकते हैं कि विलियम फॉकनर ने बड़ी हद तक जो है वो गोथिक ट्रेडिशन, वो हॉरर, मिस्ट्री और वो सारा डेथ और वो रवायात का टूटना और खौफ, मंजर कशी, ये सारा कुछ जो है वो उसने जो है वो डिस्गस्टिंग, some scenes are disgusting, surely there is bloodshed is there, although it is not very loud, no violence is to be seen, no villains, no protagonists, but still the story has a creepy type of feeling in it. The dead bodies, the skeletons, the bad smell, everything horrible is there to uh, just shock us into an amazement, a wonderland, rather, we are in. This is the Gothic tradition in which the story has got its roots. Dear students, thank you very much for participating in today's discussion. Till next session, it is Allah Hafiz and goodbye from my side. Thank you very much once more.